Go live.
Go live. Hello, everyone.
I hope we're live. Do you want to sit and drink whiskey for 5 minutes while we wait for people to filter in?
Say hello, everybody. And we are, pour yourself a whiskey, most importantly, and think about Burns night. And we will just wait for a few more people to join.
Perfect.
Hope everyone has had a great day so far and have some nice Burns night things planned for tonight.
Body weight in haggis.
Standard.
Something like that.
Some neeps and tatties alongside, just to really weigh you down. Hi, Lucas from Belgium.
Excellent. We're
Nice
not
to
only
have
live, we're global.
Exactly. Nice to have you join us. If you want to, say hello in the comments.
Okay.
Okie dokes. The numbers are climbing. This is great. For those of you just joining, hello, I'm Annabel. This is Matt. Please pour yourself a whiskey because we're going to be talking about whiskey and no one wants to hear about whiskey without drinking some. Hello, Michael from Germany.
Double global.
Welcome. Nice to have you here. Night off with a Lorna and a single malt. Great. Great shout, Sean.
Is that just another Lorna that's joined Sean, or is it a glass of Lorna?
I reckon it's quite Rebels Lorna, but you never know. Could be either. Hello, Hannah.
Hello, Hannah.
Eric from Belgium. 2 showings from Belgium. Belgium's winning so far. Well done, guys.
Excellent. Right, should we make a little start?
Let's make a start. So thanks everyone for joining us. We are going to be drinking Nc'nean, talking about Nc'nean, but we really also want to hear your questions. So please pop them in the chat and we will try to get to all of them at some point in the evening. I am going to start and give you a bit of background to Nc'nean, and then Matt is going to tell you a bit more about how we make it and what makes it so special. So start from the beginning. I'm Annabel and I founded Nc'nean. I used to be a strategy consultant in London many moons ago, and 10 years ago I took a big leap and decided to leave that job and start a distillery. Everyone always asks me, why on earth did you end up starting a whiskey distillery? And the answer is fairly simple. From location point of view, it's based way up on the west coast on my parents' farm. Really incredibly remote, beautiful location. So that was the original inspiration for the idea. You can't really be on the west coast of Scotland and not think about whiskey. But what I really wanted to do was create something super sustainable, modern and innovative within Scotch, because I think there is this amazing tradition within Scotch, but at least what I saw 10 years ago, there wasn't really anyone focusing on sustainability. And I felt that was super important to me personally, and also focused on doing interesting and creative things with the spirit. So I had this idea. I thought, when am I going to get the chance to start a whiskey distillery again? And I kind of took the leap. It's been an interesting, fun, tough journey. I spent 2 years raising money. You have to build the distillery from scratch, and then you've got to fund yourself while you're laying down whiskey without selling anything. And of course, you're doing it all from a piece of paper, because unlike other products, you cannot just magic whiskey up as a prototype from anywhere. You need to really have a distillery, and then you've got to wait for a long time anyway. So raising the money was tough, but we eventually found some 45 in total, very passionate investors who have stuck with us throughout this crazy journey. 2015, we started building. That was probably the second toughest bit. Building projects are always rubbish, especially when they involve old buildings, remote places, highly technical equipment.
I'm really glad I joined way after all of this.
Yeah, exactly. You picked a good bit, I can tell you. And we got through it. We have a beautiful distillery on a peninsula called Morven, on the west coast of Scotland. We overlook the Isle of Mull, so we can see Tobermory from the distillery, if any of you know where that is. And 2017, we finally get into production. Gordon and Lorna, who some of you may have heard of because we have had special editions released in their name, joined us at that point. So Lorna is one of our distillers, Gordon is our distillery manager. And off we went. And I was really focused at this point on making sure that the spirit was absolutely delicious. We're really focused on spirit, and I'm sure Matt will come on a bit more to talk about that. But we had also put in place by then the kind of nuts and bolts of our sustainability strategy. And I wanted to tick off from the beginning in that kind of creation phase, the really key things. So raw materials, we only use organic Scottish barley, which is very unusual. We're the only distillery to use 100% organic Scottish barley in Scotland. Second was energy source. So we have a biomass boiler. All of our energy at the distillery is renewable. And water. We have a not at all technical, but really great water solution. It's called a large pond. And instead of needing an energy intensive, chemically intensive water cooling tower, we have a very simple closed loop cooling pond. And finally, waste is the really unglamorous bit, but we're on a farm and we have the wonderful, fairly traditional solution of feeding the leftover grains to the cows and spreading the liquid effluent on the fields. So 2017, we start distilling. It obviously takes at least 3 years to have a whiskey, and that was the point at which Matt joined us. And we launched our first whiskey in 2020, which was kind of a weird time to launch it in the middle of COVID, but we actually auctioned our first 10 bottles to charity, and the first one went for £41,000. So that was a kind of pretty exciting start to our journey.
Broke the record 4 times over.
Yeah, exactly. For a whiskey
bottle.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, we've been going ever since. So
it's been good.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about this delicious juice. If you haven't already started, please do. Don't wait for us, and certainly don't listen to either of us sober. There are a lot of things that we do very, very differently at Nc'nean, with the goal of creating this very light, very fruity, very creamy, and very accessible whiskey. I normally think of those as sort of like 3 key areas, and most of it is before the line on, before distillation, which is a very unusual approach in Scotland. Normally it's how much liquid can we make, and then let's stick it in casks and let time do its job, which is a great way of making whiskey. But it's not the only way of making whiskey. You can make great spirit first that doesn't need 20 or 30 years in a cask before it's delicious.
Yeah.
Lucas, that's what's in our glass. So we've got the Nc'nean flagship expression. Oh, the Zoom filter will not let us see it.
I told it in front of me, so it thinks it's part of the person. It is
part of you.
It is part of me. It's batch SB20 for anyone who's interested.
But ideally, if I'm doing my job properly as a blender, they should all taste pretty much the same. That's kind of the goal. So the big things that we do differently, number one, as Annabel's already alluded to, we're completely organic, and we only use organic Scottish barley. Having this as the base for your raw ingredient, your main ingredient in making whiskey, gives us a lot more room to produce more interesting and innovative flavors. Organic barley has a really broad range of nutrients because it's living and breathing in a living and breathing farm. So rather than just using the same nitrates from the same fertilizer that go into commercially farmed barley, you're working with the land, you're working with the animals that surround that land and live in the soil, and you generate just a wider, broader range of nutrients for what ultimately yeast to eat in our next step, which is making the beer before we make our spirits. So having that really nutrient-rich, broad-range barley gives lots of interesting things for yeast to eat. And when yeast has more interesting things to eat, it produces more interesting things on the other side. So it's not just there to make alcohol and CO2 and more yeast, it's also there to make flavour. In particular, we use 2 different yeast strains in tandem, and we run very long fermentation times for Scotland. It's up to 114 hours, which is incredibly long, and the average is 50 to 55. And that extra contact time gives more time for yeast to make these more interesting things. In particular, to get slightly nerdy for a second, mid-chain esters, long-chain esters. Mid-chain esters are your juicy fruits, so your peaches, your apricot, your pineapple, those lovely, rich, bright, fresh, fruity flavors. And then long-chain esters, in this case, are their fats. They are texture, they are weight, they are viscosity, they are creaminess, they are richness. Lends itself to the texture of the dram itself, so it's very soft and lovely, but it also lends itself to the finish because these big heavy compounds they are oils, and they stick to your tongue and they drag flavor along with it. So even though we've got this very light style whiskey. It's got quite a long finish comparative.
Which is really unusual because people normally associate that texture with the kind of much heavier spirit, the lower cut points on the still, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas the organic barley allows us to bring that texture through while still capturing those higher esters and all those fruity notes.
Exactly. And then the next stage is in distillation. And as you've alluded to, we take what's referred to as a tight high cut. I've got a really pretentious way of explaining this. Wonderful. Imagine, as you do every day, the visible and non-visible spectrum of light. So we have infrared, we have ultraviolet, and in the middle we have this lovely rainbow. If you think of that as everything that comes out of a still, your infrared, your ultraviolet, that's your heads and tails, that's the stuff that will either make you blind or make you ill, so you cut that away, that's no good. And you're left with this rainbow. It's a big full rainbow, and it's a big spectrum of flavour. It's a big spectrum of weights of compounds, so lighter stuff at the start and then heavier stuff at the end, which tends to mean lighter flavours at the start, heavier flavours at the end. Most distilleries take a Skittles approach and try and take all of the rainbow, maximise the amount of alcohol they can get through, which means they take through a lot of those heavier, weightier compounds that tend to take a long time to mature in cask into something delicious. In this rainbow analogy, we take red through green. We stop before we hit blue, indigo, violet. And that means we're only taking these brighter, cleaner, fruitier, lighter style flavour compounds through. So we end up with this bright, fresh spirit that's of a very, let's say, drinkable quality straight away.
Yeah. That's the idea. I always wanted to make it delicious coming off the still. And I've always believed if you make delicious spirit that's drinkable before it's even gone into a barrel and use excellent barrels, you can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. And then on barrels, slightly unusually, I'd say, for Scotland, we blend our casks at the end. Obviously, like every single malt you're tasting, other than single casks, will be a mixture of casks. But for a lot of distilleries, they'll tend to pick a style. So they'll pick X bourbon casks or X sherry casks. Like, this is what we use, be it for different releases or whatever. At Nc'nean, we have 3 cask varieties that we mostly use, especially in the flagship expression. So they're referred to as STR red wine, X bourbon casks, and sherry butts. So we'll start this. The first 55%, just over half of the whiskey, is these STR red wine casks. Now, STR stands for shaved, toasted, and recharred. And what we do is we take red wine casks, normally from Rioja, but it'll be something fruity, like Tempranillo kind of based, but very fruity, fresh red wine. Once the cask has been used for as long as it can be used by the wine industry, we'll then take on that cask and recondition it. And that's done by shaving the internal 2 millimeters off of the cask, which gets rid of all the dead charcoal and the dead layer of wood. And then we toast and rechar that cask. And that process not only rejuvenates the oak, you have a fresh layer for maturation, which is very impactful. You get a lot of fresh spice and sweetness from the wood that way. But you're also going to caramelize any of the residual wine sugars that are left in the stave. And then these big caramelized compounds fall into the whiskey really, really easily. So we get a lot of jammy fruits, we get a lot of caramel, we get a lot of richness and bread and spice from this cask variety. It's a really, really good way of adding depth and complexity to something quite young. And then the next step is 43%. So we're almost all of the rest of the whiskey is in ex-bourbon casks or ex-American whiskey casks. So sometimes they'll have been used specifically for bourbon, sometimes they'll have been used for bourbon, then American whiskey, and then come to us. And this cask variety is a little less intense than the STRs, so it allows a lot more of our distillery profile to shine through. So we get more of the citrus, more of the juicy fruits, coupled with a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of coconut, a little bit of creme brulee, like the things that you normally associate with American oak. And then the last 2% is the sherry butts. So sherry butts are big casks, they're 500 litres, so they're over double the size of the other 2 casks that we use. And it would have previously held Oloroso sherry, so something that's quite sweet and Christmas cake, spiced, fruity, decadent, very sweet and rich and impactful, which is why I only use 2% in the blend. I think of that sherry liquid, that white sherry cask liquid, as being like salt and pepper. It's like seasoning. You shouldn't really taste sherry cask in our whiskey, but it does make all the other flavors pop and make sense together. It's the equivalent of adding, the correct amount of salt to your steak. It just makes everything else make sense.
Exactly. So
I need to drink this now. Sorry,
you do.
It's too much talking.
I wonder who else has got some of our flagship whiskey in front of them. And if you have, tell us what you think it tastes of. There are no wrong answers. We're going to start throwing some words out there as well, but I really want to know what you guys think too.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when we write official tasting notes for this release, there are three main flavors that we always aim to create in the whiskey, and we refer to them as lemon posset, stone fruit, and caraway rye bread, spiced rye bread. So that first one, lemon posset, or for everyone who doesn't know what a posset is, lemon cheesecake, something like that. It's my sneaky way of getting two flavor notes into one, and it is
lemony and creamy.
It should be lemony and creamy, yeah. It should be very vibrant, citrusy, fresh. But importantly, the texture needs to be there. It needs to be creamy, and that's not only for the whiskey on its own. That obviously makes it work really well because you get that rich texture, you get that longer finish. It also makes it incredibly mixable. So our signature serve, we have some soda. Let's do a little whiskey soda as well while we're here.
Oh, did you hear that sound?
That was a very good pop. Ooh. So the recipe on the side of our bottle: 2 parts whiskey, 4 parts soda. The whiskey 6. It's a really good introduction to whiskey for people new to the category. You get to enjoy thanks so much. You get to enjoy all of the great flavors of whiskey in a very accessible format. Because you're lowering the ABV, because you're adding the carbon dioxide, you're getting those bubbles and that liveliness. It brings a lot of the aromas to the fore, but in a very
And it's not only about the accessibility, in my view. It's also about what you want to drink at different times of day.
100%.
And this is so refreshing and delicious, and it's so simple.
Cheers.
Cheers. Matt was skeptical about this beforehand. He's like, I don't know whether we're going to make a whiskey 6.
That's definitely not whiskey 6. So those big creamy compounds, those long-chain fatty acid esters, when you mix them with soda water, they become fluffy and round and almost drying. So the whiskey 6 serve becomes almost like an aperitif, and it's something that you'd have, right at the start, rather than your whiskey being your afterthought, the thing that you have right at the end of the night and maybe forget about after 2 bottles of red wine.
Exactly. And then blame for your hangover.
And then blame for your hangover, yeah. It can be the first thing that you drink in an evening, and it can be the thing that sets you up for the rest of the night. And you're getting to appreciate all of those vibrant, fruity flavors, that fresh citrus, and then a little bit of that wood spice and the caraway and the breadiness, just in a very soft, delicate, drying, mouth-wetting, moorish way.
Exactly. And I also love the fact it's not a sweet drink. A lot of the drinks that are associated with that kind of pre-dinner occasion, like with tonic, and they're very cloying after a drink, whereas actually, honestly, you can drink this all night.
Yeah, whiskey soda is very
responsibly,
light, but very light, very refreshing, very easygoing.
And it shows off the whiskey without, drowning out the flavors with other flavors. So, yeah, we're big whiskey and soda fans over here. Not a new drink. I mean, it's been popular for
if anything, it's
centuries.
The reason that we all drink single malt Scotch whiskey today is because of the phylloxera epidemic and people previously drinking brandy and soda, and then there was no brandy. So, what do you drink when there's no brandy? You switch to whiskey, and it's a whiskey soda, and then you realise that whiskey soda is substantially better, and you just continue drinking whiskey soda for the last 150 years. Should we have a look at some of the questions at the side?
Yes, let's.
So, Annabel, did you always love whiskey?
No, I did not. I always thought I should love whiskey. Lots of people around me always love whiskey, and I always tried it whenever anyone else had it, and I couldn't get my head around it. And there was actually a very fortuitous moment. I'd actually taken some time off from my previous job to do the research on what would become Nc'nean. And that involved going on a little trip to Islay, because there are lots of whiskey distilleries on Islay. And the night before I went, I tried a whiskey that I loved.
Excellent.
That is what pushed me over the edge. Don't know what whiskey it was, sadly, but I finally got there. But, I think I'd been given a lot of very strong whiskies, like cask strength, a lot of peated whiskies, and maybe just not really been introduced to it in the right way, which is part of kind of what I want to address with Nc'nean. It's part of the reason for suggesting whiskey and soda. If you don't like neat whiskey, then just put some soda in it. It's delicious.
Yeah.
Especially if it's Nc'nean.
Next up, Lucas said, do we intend to do any finishing? We do, and we have, and we will continue to. So quite a few of the single casks that we've released, sort of around everywhere, some for individual stores, some for individual countries and markets. We've had a few different finishes there. We've had Madeira recently with Timber Yard restaurant
in Edinburgh,
the Michelin star restaurant, which is very delicious and very rich and Madeira-y. We've done some sherry before. We've done a couple of tequilas before.
Yes.
All sorts, and there's plenty more coming.
We've got lots of exciting things in the warehouse as well, with some planned this year for going all over the world. Some go to Europe, some for the UK, some for the US. So
you mentioned rum and Madeira as well, and we have a Madeira rum cask as well. So
we do. Oh, that's coming out.
That's coming out real soon.
Oh, in March. Yes, it's absolutely delicious. It's coming out in March, and it's literally Madeira rum cask from
Madeira X rum. Than us.
Exactly, from an amazing rum distillery we know really well, based in the southwest of England, also very much on the kind of same sustainability journey as we are, and they sent us one of their casks, so that will be coming out in March on our website, so look out for that.
Very exciting.
And Renee said that you have a Huntress 23 and it tastes like it's written Woodland and Candy. We were quite pleased with that name, got to be honest.
Yeah, we circled back round to it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And so Huntress we bring out every spring, and it's our kind of experimental thing. We work a lot with other yeasts other than the two that Matt mentioned that are kind of in all of our whiskies. We add exciting extra ones from time to time. And Huntress, so far we've released two Huntresses in 22 and 23, have been kind of showcases of those yeast experiments this year, and this will be coming out in April. It's not quite a yeast experiment, but it's also very exciting, and it's got hopefully a similarly evocative name to Woodland and Candy, but we'll let you guys be the judge of that when it comes out. Right, Matt, you've got to take the batch name question.
I do.
This is your design.
It is my design. So Hilde has asked, we're drinking batch BU06. What do the batch codes mean? So, the short answer is I can't tell you.
Because I'd have to kill you.
The long answer. So on the neck label, I'm going to have to position this behind me. On the neck label, even that's not working. On the label at the back here, we have batch, and then there will be, if it was one of our early batches, so anything up from batch 1 through to 18, it will just be batch 1 through 18. That was a slightly different recipe. And then when we changed batch size, when we moved up a little bit in batch size, we changed the recipe a little bit, just a little tweak. That's where we added the extra sherry casks. And we thought we'd change the batch code in line with that. And then because I am a nerd, I decided to create a secret code for the batches. And this is something that we do for the flagship expression. It's something that we have done with the cask strength release in Germany.
Yeah.
That's a separate code in the same format. But it's there to be deciphered. It's there to be discovered.
And anyone who deciphers it gets a mega prize.
Cask of whiskey, I believe.
Whole cask of whiskey.
Whole cask of whiskey.
Yeah. There are only 3 people in the whole world who know what this code is.
Yeah, I thought it was 2.5 because you'd forgotten.
Yeah, okay. I can remember the vague concept. I just can't remember the details.
But yes, the code is in direct reference to something else. Whoever is the first person to tell us what the code is in direct reference to, we will give you a cask of whiskey.
But also, in case you're not into code deciphering, the important thing is that on our website, whenever you buy a bottle of Nc'nean, you can go onto our website and look at the batch code, and it will tell you everything we are legally allowed to tell you about that batch. It'll tell you the proportion of the cask in it. It will tell you when it was bottled. It will tell you the age of the youngest cask, not the oldest, because we're not allowed to tell you that. Yeast to use, etc., etc. And it's part of our campaign just to be super transparent. We would really love to tell you the ages of every single cask in there. We're not quite allowed to do that yet. I'm sure it will come. But yeah, I just think it's interesting for everyone to know what's in their whiskey. So
definitely.
You can find that on our website.
The more information we can share, the better. And eventually, the governing bodies will allow us to share all of the information that we have.
I'm confident that they will.
Okay, that's all the questions that we currently have. If there's any more, you've got until I finish this drink to get some more questions in.
So thinking of the question about finishes, can you tell us a little bit about the single cask that we released today with Matt Morrison? Oh,
most certainly, yes. So every year we run a cocktail competition for the entree for bartenders, for anyone that works in hospitality really, where you enter your drink, you present it at different heats around the UK, and then there'll be a final. So we had the final held at the distillery in summer last year, and one winner, one bartender is selected to take home the grand prize, and the grand prize is to sit down with me, a lucky soul, select a single cask, and then they'll release it. So the single cask release has their name on it. They get to keep a case for themselves, so they've got sort of 6 bottles that they can consume, sell, whatever they want, whatever they're happy with, and then we also give them 10% of the profits. So everything goes sold through our website. We calculate how much money we made off of that, and then we give them 10% for their time as a little prize. Bartenders always need a little bit of cash. It's a nice step.
It's always good.
And this gets released in for the last 2 years in January. We figured Burns Night was a suitable release for this one. So this year's champion, Matthew Morrison, works at Bertie's Whiskey Bar at the Five Farms Hotel in Braemar, up in the other middle of nowhere in Scotland. Not our middle of nowhere, but definitely far from the rest of civilization. But a stunning hotel and a fantastic whiskey bar with an incredibly knowledgeable team, very passionate individuals. Matt selected his single cask. It is 17193, so that means it was produced. The distiller was produced in 2017, and it was, well, considering that was our first year of production, it would have been the 193rd cask of whiskey we ever filled.
Absolutely.
It's an ex-bourbon cask, and it reminded Matthew of his sort of introduction to spirits and into drinking. Into drinking spirits. So he is a bit of a globe hopper, and he lived in Guyana for a little time, and he really got into spirits by drinking rum after Guyana. So these very tropical, fruity, pungent, funky things. And we found this particular cask, and it is vibrantly fruity and fresh. It's also incredibly decadent. It's one of the really creamy casks that we get every now and again. And then we sat down and done some ABV tests. We released it at 51.4, which is old 90 proof, which is a really good drinking strength. It's a really good bottling strength because it will sort of last in perpetuity. I'm talking like 100 years, 200 years. We can still crack this, and it'll be as fresh as the day we bottled it. And then tasting notes, we're saying like spiced banana bread and that creaminess. And it's a really good cask because it's a really good representation of Matt's taste in whiskey. And it also is delicious outside of that context.
Exactly. Perfect. And if there are only
40
bottles left.
Or so.
So getting quick if you want one, if you're based in the UK. And sorry to those of you that are not based in the UK, but there are lots of single casks coming to Europe later this year. So don't be disheartened. Lucas has asked about peat. Well, that is a big question. No, is the answer. And there are 2 reasons for that. But the most important reason, it is unfortunately not at all sustainable to dig up peat and burn it. It is the most incredible carbon sink, and it is the most incredible biodiverse habitat. And digging up peat, drying it and burning it releases the carbon and disturbs the habitat. So it is a big no-no in my view. However, I do understand lots of people like peated whiskey. It's just not for us. So yeah, we will never do something peated, but maybe there'll be something smoky maybe from another source in the future. Yeah, it's on the list.
We've already alluded to the regulations around how you communicate Scotch whiskey, but also how you make it are rightly quite strict, but that does not leave a lot of wiggle room for experimentation, especially if they're trying to create something new outside of the considered heritage and tradition of single malt Scotch whiskey. But there's plenty of room for creating smoky spirits without the use of peat. That would be a much more sustainable approach, something that could last in perpetuity, which we could potentially do. Yeah. It's not immediately in the plans.
Just logistically challenging.
Very logistically challenging. And it would be fascinating. It would be interesting to be at the front of creating a whole new branch of single malt Scotch whiskey, which we've already done in how we produce our spirit. So doing it again for a different style would be an interesting challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Watch this space. Renee is. You're on to the Kirsch one. That's the one that came out just now, isn't it?
This 17257.
You have an encyclopedic knowledge of our car.
I thought that was the sherry. I thought that was the hoggy.
Oh, maybe. Oh, Renee, can you tell us what it says about it?
Yeah. It'll either say rye or it will say cream sherry hogshead.
Yeah, exactly.
Either way, it's delicious. You're in for either a very licoricey.
No,
spicy
look, here we
sweet-
go. Because this.
Oh, the rye cask is 17,340.
Okay, yes,
so
Renee,
it must be the
you
sherry.
must have the sherry. Okay,
Mm.
that's one of the only sherries we've
Ever done.
This is the only sherry we've ever released a single cask. So Renee, you have something very special. And Michael, you have something very special as well, because we have never released anything else in a rye cask. So there we go.
Yeah, it's 17,340, which is another Kirsch exclusive.
Exactly.
Bourbon cask finished in a rye cask, and that adds that kind of licoricey spice. Yes, Renee said
There we
it's
go.
the egg sherry.
Yeah.
I knew it was the egg sherry.
So good.
Yeah, that's a really fun drum. It's very it was a very interesting one to release, especially quite early in our release plan, because it's probably the least Nc'nean whiskey we've ever released. It's incredibly delicious. It just doesn't follow through with a lot of the things that we associate with Nc'nean now. It doesn't have a lot of that vibrant citrus, but it does still have that creaminess, that texture. It's just incredibly fruity, incredibly rich.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet treat. And you agree, apparently. You said so delicious. So that's wonderful.
Excellent. So glad to hear it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
So nice to have you all on here. Thanks for all your questions. It's been such a pleasure. And yeah, happy burns night.
Happy burns.
Go eat some haggis. That's what we need.
Have a great evening.
Okay,
Goodbye.
cheers. Bye.